Bro, it is unbelievable that we're sitting here in your 100th episode. And I've got to address the fact that I've stepped in here as a guest and an interviewer, but I'm excited for the role a little bit because as much as you and I have spoken about the Footy Coach, and I've been amazed just watching your progress over the last few years and learning just by default of rubbing shoulders with you on a regular basis about so much more of the football world. It's it's pretty crazy just how quickly they've laid up. I'm not sure if it feels that way or if it's felt like a lot of hard work, but I guess as a bit of a launch pad, can you speak to that a little bit? Because 100 episodes, it's caught me off guard. It surprised me how quickly you've stacked them up.
Yeah, thanks, Tyson. It's awesome actually to chat on episode 100. It's sort of been coming up for a little while now and finally ticked over. And as a fellow podcaster, I think you have a great insight into the amount of work that goes into each episode. It is a lot of work. From doing the correspondence with a potential guest, and a lot of guests, just got too much on, can't fit you in. So when you do that, you're really thankful when they do come on. And then so a lot of correspondence there, then getting a time to suit you both. And then preparation. I usually spend a good hour or two you researching the person. Even though if I feel like I know the person, I go over it. I love my numbers and stats and years, and hopefully try and do them justice in that regard. And then you do the conversation, which is probably an hour or so, and then some of the more labor intensive stuff is the bit of editing, intros, outros, making it all smooth, editing out any bits and pieces that don't quite sound right, and then you go about posting online and through the social media, and it all sounds pretty simple, but as you know, it takes this time. It's a job, isn't it? So and to do most weeks we get out there and do one. And yeah, it's been a lovely journey though, and it started in the depth of a COVID year in 2020, and when we're all sitting around doing nothing. Well, I was lucky enough to keep my job at the time, so I was thankful for that. But needed another project, absolutely, and the football coaching space was where I was wanting to head, and got into it this time 3 years ago. June 2020 was when we did our first episode. And so haven't looked back since. And then episode 100, so we had some magnificent guests on, like I mentioned, really thankful for each one of them, and sharing the knowledge that you're talking to some people. Like I remember early days talking to Gary Ayres and thinking, Jesus, this guy has been there and done it, like 5-time premiership winning player, grand finals as a coached at the AFL level 10 plus years. He's sitting there asking his insights and questions is just as a listener, and as a host, I was absorbing all those lessons too from someone like that, and he was generous with his time, and it kept rolling from there. So so feel pretty lucky, and it's been awesome. And I think hopefully we're on a really good journey, and it only gets better from here.
Yeah, well, there's so many things in what you just said that I think I could follow up with a few other questions, but I'm going to have to select one. So I've known you for now 22 years, pretty much, coming on 22 years. So if there's one person who knows you incredibly well, it's myself. And I know that one of your greatest character strengths and one of your biggest character traits is when you decide to do something well, or when you decide to do something, I should say, you decide to do it very well. There's no half-hearted, and that's a characteristic I think that both you and I share. But even still, in preparation for coming on here to have a bit of a chat to you today, I was having a scroll through some of the guests that you've had on the show just last night. So I was scrolling through the 100 episodes and I thought, okay, now I'm going to have to pick his brain about how he's managed this, because some of the names that you've brought onto this podcast, myself not excluded, are absolutely unbelievable. We've had Paul Roos, we've had Mick Malthouse, you had Gary Ayres, Craig McRae. I mean, you've rubbed shoulders now with some of the biggest dogs. So before we tap into too much of your personal story, which I'm actually pumped to hear more about and also share with your listeners, can you just speak a little bit about the process of how you've actually managed to get some of these guests on? Because I think I look at those names and I'm intimidated. And I'm a lot further separated from the football world than what you and your listeners are. So I think the fact that you've managed to get people like the names that I just mentioned on the show speaks not only to some strength of yours that people would like to tap into, but your ability just to be able to connect and take lessons from some of these bigger names.
Yeah, well, it's never the easiest thing, getting guests to come on. Like as you mentioned, everyone's got full lives and full schedules, especially high performers like these sort of AFL level coaches and community coaches and all the great people we've had. But yeah, probably persistence. It brings a funny old story. I think your dear mother Sue, who I grew up with as well, she always had the saying, the worst they can say is no. So I did reach out to all the impossible targets I thought in my head that might be able to come on, and we've got a few of them on, which is great. So, but it is a lot of people, to be honest, don't find the time or can't do it for whatever reason, and that's fine. So yeah, we've got to. That's where sort of a lot of the work rate goes into it, is making sure we reach out to a number of people, and usually get a couple back who say they want to come on, which is awesome. So yeah, and then people recommending guests as well. Like I just had a recent one on with AJ Ballantyne, a netball coach, and doing really well in that space. And that was a sort of recommendation, not directly, but my previous guest, Aaron Greaves out of Carlton Footy Club, sort of said maybe reach out to other team sports and how they coach. When I asked him for a recommendation, and so that sort of led to that. So yeah, I sort of asked recommendations and get some people to help refer me on a bit. Link them through professional websites like LinkedIn and so forth. So yeah, no, it's yeah, that's where the work rate definitely comes in, and I really try and be super respectful for all their time, and understand that they have busy lives, and so extremely punctual, and usually try and nail all the details for them, so make it as easy as possible. So yeah, we do it all via Zoom. I had a previous podcast called the Jock X podcast, which you would know, and I'm sure thousands and millions of listeners around the world know. But no, it was a good, fun podcast. I did it. Probably started in 2015, I think it was, and I interviewed basically like just elite performers from multi millionaires who great super businesses, elite sports people. Benita Willis, like world cross country champion, and Australian 4-time Olympians, and footballers at the time too, and still online, I think, the Jockey podcast. But that was actually when I used to go and visit them. So I was driving across the state, and I had people flying from Sydney, I remember, and coming down to meet me, and yeah, it was all been done person. So this podcast, I took the pressure off myself, and I think COVID sort of allowed for that, to do it all I do it via Zoom or online here. So that's made it much easier to do. But yeah, previously I used to hop in my car and drive across Melbourne when I was living there, and meet people in different, go to people's houses and go to cafes and wherever we did record, out in the park.
I got memories of calling you and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" You're like, "I'm in the middle of nowhere." I go, "What are you doing out there?" You go, "I'm off to do another podcast." So you're 100% committed to the cause. It is beautiful. You're right about the fact that the COVID era obviously made it far more accessible, and I think not only for us, it made our life easier in terms of being able to record with people regardless of where they are, but easier for them as well. One secret as well that I think people don't know about you, I'm not sure if it is the Jock X factor, but you've also growing up rubbed shoulders with quite a number of elite performers. Now, obviously, I think the standout to me, or the one that I know about, is probably Scott Pendlebury. I know football was in your blood even before you and I met each other back in 2001, 2002. So this was a different life to me, but a little fun one as well was you've also went to high school with the great man Andrew McQualter, and my old basketball nemesis, who's currently the interim coach down there at Richmond. So tell us, I guess we could paint the foundation or get a bit more of a picture as to how you found your way in here, because obviously we just touched on Jock X podcast. I've mentioned the fact that your mindset is very much when I'm in, I'm in. But I know that there's been a couple of little changes and pivots along the way before you found your way back to maybe what is your one big true love in AFL football. I think even in our relationship, which started as middle distance runners, there'd always been a love which might have been on hold temporarily for a couple of years when you were focused on trying to qualify for the Olympics as a young middle distance runner. but I think from my perspective, it makes sense that you found your way back here. And I mean, we'll talk about how quickly you've sort of started to climb through the ranks in the world of football coaching. It's blown my mind, as your best mate. I'm sure it's blown a heck of a lot of people in the industry's mind just how quickly that's happened. But I guess just as a way to launch into the rest of the conversation, I thought it might be nice to hear a little more about your background in sport, in elite leadership, and how all of these experiences sort of come back and tied together to see you where you're at the moment?
Yeah, well, first off, I'll preface the conversation. I've sort of done 100 episodes, and I've never really spoken about my background very much. I've let little stories here and there, as you do with the podcast over the journey. But I felt like the podcast was for community level, state level coaches, maybe even some AFL coaches. And I know the fact that AFL boys, especially from past guests, check in on episodes they like as they come up. But it was all for them, and it wasn't about me at all. And I just felt like I was a bit of the host, the facilitated, the person bringing this information out, of these great guests, and the listeners across the country and beyond were getting the use out of that. So I didn't feel like people needed to know about my background too much. I just felt like I was, providing this great service. I feel this podcast, which wasn't really, nothing was like it at the time. I think there's a couple of people done little bits and pieces since, but hopefully it's quite unique in what we're doing, and that's what I've sort of done for 100. So I don't think I've really spoken about mine, because some of these guys who have on have amazing stories, and household names and stories you've read about in the papers and so forth. So mine's more of a common story, but I guess everyone has some unique story, and then that's and hopefully today we can talk a bit about it. So back at school, yeah, we did have some good footballers in the area. I'll just point out to listeners, I'm by no means close friends with either of those gentlemen you've mentioned. We did go cross paths at school. I did go to primary school with Scott Pendlebury, which was cool. He's actually the year above, the same age as me. And then Andrew McQuarrie, I think, come through Gippsland Grammar at year 9 for 1 year. So I remember doing a bit of track with him, but and then I think he went off to, was it Xavier he went to? Where did he end up at? Xavier?
It's a great question. I
think it was
couldn't
Xavier.
tell you.
Old
Yeah, I
Melbourne
get
Grammar,
confused because
one of them.
Xavier Alice was at our school for a little while, and I remember he
Yes.
left, and I always get confused with whether he went to Xavier, or I get the names all muddled up. So I'm not 100% sure where everyone ended up. I just know that a good quality group of footballers came through the school.
Yeah, and there's a few. Like obviously Josh Dunkley come a couple of years after us, and but Pendles, Jesus, one of the legends of all time. But I've actually got a funny story on Pendles. We when we were at primary school, we made for the first time the state titles, right? 4x100 meter relay. I don't know if I've told you this story, but so we made the 4x100. It's me, my best mate at the time, Luke McNally, and Daniel Larvity, Muffa. So there was Jock, Muffa, Luke, and Pendles, or Dipper as he was known then, and we're going down to the state, and Scott had already made the high jumps. He's already gone down, and us three boys went with my mum, drove us down that day. The 2.5 hour trip down to Old Olympic Park there, where the Collingwood are situated now. And anyway, we get there, and as we're coming in, Scott's leaving with his mum, and they sort of said, "Oh, hi, I was just going to go get some lunch or something." And we thought, "Oh, that's fine." Interesting enough, but our race was about an hour and a half away, I'd assume, probably that time. Long story short, come times for our heats, state relay. This is the biggest sporting moment of our lives for us 11-year-olds at this time. Biggest moment ever. We pumped to the eyeballs. Scott is nowhere to be found. 3 of us there, missing the main anchor leg, the fastest man of our group. He was the quickest. I was the second quickest, and a couple of other lads. And then so missing him, mum's searching through the stands. They're looking for him as they're calling. Our race is getting closer and closer. Can't find him. Race is about to come on, and then race takes off without us. So we get the state title. Didn't get to run the heat. Scott wasn't to be cited. Pendles let us down. We wouldn't believe it, would you? Massive. This is as good as it gets. Sometimes you might not get beyond this. And then long story short, as we're walking out, finally, all absolute flat as a tack. We're all 3 of us left. Here comes Scott and his mum come back in. They just totally mucked up the times of what time the heat was. And it was just like, oh my, yeah, they were really, they were flat as too. But we just,
that's an unbelievable story.
Unbelievable story, yeah. So that was, when I was year 5, 11-year-old, first time I went to state, and Geez, we're flat. And then I think we went home and had McDonald's like home. That made us a bit happier. So,
Oh, that's so
um,
disappointing. Make sure if you know Pendles out there that you share this with him, because I feel as though that's one thing that probably gets lost in the grandeur of his career. The day he stuffed up the 11-year-old state titles 4x100 meters, he's been making
like
up
the
for it
time.
ever
No
since.
wonder he's such a professional now. So he learned his lesson early. So, but no. So like, yeah, the listeners, I went to school with him, but I will definitely, he was a year above, so I sort of wasn't running in a close friendship circle. But it's been amazing watching his journey. He's beyond belief how far and how good he is. And he's still going, which is insane. I feel like I'm getting older, but then I look at Pendles, I'm like, he's still playing, so I can't be that old. So, and
He looks
it's
fantastic. Yeah, he
yeah, he
looks
does look
incredibly fit.
fantastic too. No, he does. He's still as shredded as ever, so yeah, no, he's been unbelievable. But it was interesting at the time. So obviously with him around, and we went from St. Mary's there in Sale, and we had a hell of a football team for the local area. Like we won 3 flags in a row. We were unbeatable pretty much. I think 1 or 2 games we lost, and I think 1 or 2 of them was when Pendles wasn't playing. So when you have a future Hall of Famer rolling in your midfield, I can still remember him coming out of the square and his left foot and rolling around. And I was usually, centre half forward, but I was a sort of bigger kid and trying to kick a snag or two. But yeah, so we were pretty much unbeatable. And we had a lot of good players. Guys went and played VFL as well. I don't think anyone else played AFL out of that group. Don't think. But there's a few guys went VFL. James Bristow, I know, went to the Bendigo Bombers at the time, and a couple others. But and yeah, there's some other guys, really good local footballers. But so yeah, so we had a really cool upbringing of football. And probably my story comes to when I was about 14. This is going to sound random for listeners too. So I was explaining. So at 14, I was doing football. Like we had a really good team, unbeatable. Pretty much in that age group, under 12s, under 14s. And then I was doing some track as you do at school, nothing special. But I'd just gotten into track probably a few months earlier, more of a training basis with the great Joe Carmody down there in Moe. And that's obviously where we met not long after that. And then I was also, which listeners probably have no idea, but I was heavily involved in equestrian horse riding. So my family's right into that. And I was competing from the age of 6 or 7 years old. I was going to Melbourne, Canberra. So I won Melbourne show. I won Canberra. I was probably one of the best in Australia, in the probably top 2 or 3 boy rider in Australia at the time. Got states. Yeah, I've been nationals, qualified 2 or 3 times for that stage. 13, 14. So I was quite, I was quite good at that, decent at that as well. And so I started 3 sports at the time, and football's. We'd been, like I mentioned, like we had a really strong team, but like I'd been, got down to the sort of the country, that age group. Got down the selection trials, didn't make the team, but sort of got close-ish. We done Windy Hill there, which was really exciting. And again, we had like 4 of us go. So we had a pretty, like I said, pretty talented little young fellas running around at that stage. But yeah, so I was, going okay at football as well. And then running came along, and in running in a few months, I sort of got, I think I finished at 5. I think I was 6th in a final of 400. And then a couple of months later, I ran like 4:39 for 1,500 meters as a 13-year-old. And if I did that a couple of months earlier, I pretty much would have won state at the time. So probably like, if I was just, because I got the sport pretty late. But around that time, yeah, I would have basically won the state title. And I just thought, when I was about 14, all I wanted to do was be elite at any sport. I just wanted to be like probably professional at one of the sports as an adult. That was the goal, like many young people. And so I had these 3 sports, and I was trying to work out which sport I could be elite at. And I just felt, starting with football, I could see the gap between me and Pendles. And looking back, it kind of makes sense. But I didn't realize at the time how good he was going to be. But I remember thinking, I'm just not at his level. I didn't have his skills. His ability to find the ball was unbelievable at that age as well, obviously, as a 14-year-old. And I just felt like there was a gap between that and me and that. And then horse riding, I was getting a bit over. Wasn't really very much interested in it. As I sort of got to 13, I was sort of getting over it, but even though I was still having plenty of success in that space, which is interesting. But I just really wasn't really interested. But yeah, I just loved the running and athletics. So that was, I sort of decided at that age that I'm going to focus on that. And, and the reality was we're thinking Olympics at that stage. Like, yeah, any good kid that age, that's what we're trying to do. That was the goal. And like I said, I thought, I haven't even just started the sport. I feel like I'm ready to sort of climb the ranks pretty quickly. Obviously got some talent for it. And so that's what happened. So athletics become my main sport from 14 through to probably 17. That was probably my main sport. And I was going all out to make it. And, we got to national level across country, but I always seemed to make a final, never really could get into the medals at state. Did 800, 1500 meters, but by the time I got to 16, I started to plateau. And by the time I was 17, I was definitely plateauing. And that's pretty much when I realized the dream was over. I was not going to, kids like yourself. And I know you've obviously got a strong background. You kicked on from there, but, you and me used to run together, and I had some other really good mates who got to a high level, and they were just sort of, their times were just dropping, and mine just plateaued by the time I was sort of 16. So that was the end of that. And then, so from there, I was doing school footy, obviously, through that stage. I was captain of the school footy team and stuff, but I was probably never fully invested for a few years there in my footballing, because athletics was my main sport in cross country. And then school came, and year 11 and 12, and trying to do the best you can there. And then from there, it was just off to university at Deakin doing sport management. And that's when I got really back into football. Played some amateur football there and really enjoyed it. And then me being me, I actually briefly told this story briefly to Josh Jenkins on the podcast, but I must have been 20. I would have been 20 at the time. And I thought, I'm gonna go all out here to try and get drafted, like all out. I'm not gonna leave any stone unturned. I've only been back really full time probably for a season or so, and I thought, rightio. So I started contacting VFL clubs to try and get a start. And I think Box Hill half laughed at me when I said I was coming from Amos and trying to get into, I said something along the lines of, you do realize this is an elite program. And I was like, yes, that's why I'm ringing. And anyway, so I ended up at Div 1 footy at Noble Park. They were a powerhouse in the Eastern Football League, notorious top 2 or 3 team. Really, really good player. And I was trying to actually think about a player that had drafted a year or two earlier. Went to St Kilda. I can't think of his name. And I thought, that could be me, come back late. I know I've been focusing on athletics for a few years. I can come back in. And this is the period too where there was mature age recruits getting drafted. Like Josh Jenkins was one. He was 2021. Mickey Barlow, Michael Hibbard. There's a few others that got into AFL lists. And I thought, I'm on here. Like, I looked at the draft. I remember looking at the 2008 draft, and that was the Jack Watts draft. And like my 3K time, I could do it 9:30. So I was elite endurance, obviously, with my running background. I thought, I've got that. I was decent size, 191. I thought, medium tall player. And I thought, we were a chance here. Like, we got some elite attributes, I guess, on the running side of things, particularly. But probably when it come to the crunch, once I got into Div 1 footy and started playing, I just probably didn't have the agility, elite speed. I had the engine, but probably not the agility. The kicking probably wasn't as elite as it needed to be, looking back. And by mid-season, probably 8-9 months into this sort of dream, I realized that it wasn't going to happen. I wasn't at that standard. But that didn't stop me trying. Like, my preseason was probably harder than AFL preseasons. Like, I was doing 10K, 4-minute Ks on a Sunday, 4 sessions of weights, 3 times a week at football session. I was doing an hour or 2 of skills by myself, trying to get myself up to speed as quick as possible. Probably overtrained. And to be honest, that season I did overtrain, because I remember I had a week off after the previous season. Then was when balls out training, like in first week of October. And by February, mate, I was cooked. By February, I actually did have hamstring trouble. So then I was off for 6 weeks trying to manage a hamstring, which I'd always struggled with sort of post school, sort of high hamstring, and probably haven't really recovered since. But and struggling with that and try and get that explosive power, but I was cooked, and I just made me realize that sometimes you can overtrain and do too much. And by March, April, when the season started, like, I was kind of already feeling the pinch. Like, I sort of felt like I'd done a whole season already. So I trained like a maniac, to be honest, for what we're trying to do. And probably too focused. Like I was definitely, first at training by a mile. I was getting there at 6 o'clock start. I was getting there by 4:45, and I was running laps before anyone got near the track. And first one on, last one off. I took that absolutely to heart, and probably overdid it, to be honest.
So
But
what year was that?
that was 2009. 2009, yeah. So
2009. Okay, so it's interesting
sorry,
looking back.
I suppose I spoke a lot then, didn't I? Just told the whole.
No, it's actually really interesting just to get a bit of a linear overview of what took place, because I remember these patches just being in and around the scene with you. And I remember the phase where you went from middle distance runner to, no, I'm trying to get drafted in AFL. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to step back and watch this space. And I know for sure when you say your mind's on, ladies and gents, I was there and he was on. He was ready to roll. It would have been a scary time to go for a long run with you on a Sunday.
Yeah. Well, I remember I probably could actually find this video. This would be terrible to watch, but I remember you and me, we did a road trip to Adelaide, didn't we, in January 2009. And that was the year Lance Armstrong did the comeback. So he was coming back into cycling, and I was a huge Lance Armstrong and still a fan of his today. And I remember talking, I think I recorded a video with you about, I'm going to try and have a crack at AFL this year. And we recorded it. I don't know why we did, but I did at the time. I should try and dig it out. And yeah, no, 6 months later, I actually, Noble Park that year, like I said, was a powerhouse. I think, still today, I actually haven't followed them in recent years, but they were a powerhouse. And I went there because my dad sort of knew the president. I think he bought a few trailers for his trucks through it. Hercules there, trailers, Kevin Wright, it was the president at the time. And anyway, so I thought it might give me a better chance to getting in, at least know someone, give me a leg up into the not into the team, but just to know someone who gives you an opportunity. And that was the case. It was good. He's a good bloke. And so we got into, the old Noble Park, but yeah, by the mid-season, it was a train wreck of a year for them. The coach got sacked. Alan Ezard got sacked, former Essendon Premiership player. There's a lot of unsettled senior players in the group. I think a few left early in the year, and it was really unsettled club that year. The culture wasn't good, and I really didn't enjoy myself, actually, to be honest. I really, really didn't enjoy myself there. I felt really, the culture wasn't really welcoming. I felt a bit isolated. I sort of gone out of wing, left all my mates, playing other clubs. So mid-season, I actually left halfway through. Once I realized when the dream was over, I wasn't going to get drafted. I actually packed up and left, and I went to Oakley Districts, where all my mates were playing. I had about 20 mates there from uni, and had a great time. And then started in there. That was Div 2, I think, in the Southern League, and we played finals in that. But yeah, so that was sort of my real a push to try and make it as an elite footballer. But I loved it though. So just before you jump in, but I loved it though. I think you'll probably find a common theme. I love knowing that I gave it a shot. I'm not here now at 35 wondering, could have, would have, should have. And part of me thinks, maybe if I focus more during, 15, 16, 17, try to get in the Gippy Power team or something, it might help. But I don't think it would have helped that much. I just wasn't up to it, like many of us aren't. And I look back and I feel like I had a crack. I know, I'm definitely not sitting here wondering. And I love that. I feel really relaxed and content about that. And that's the same with athletics. I know I had a crack. I know I was training harder than anyone. I can trust me in that. We will train as hard as anyone. And I know that I wasn't going to be Olympian. I wasn't going to be a football star. I wasn't going to be a horse riding Olympian either, or something like that. So that was fine. That's fine. So we sort of but turn those rocks over, and that gives me, I can sit here relaxed today knowing that you did what you could with what you had.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm really interested in that, actually, because I think the realization that you're not going to make it to a particular level in a particular sport has a questionable reputation by a lot of people, because especially here in Australia or in the West, where we're all about this idea of hard work getting results. And I'm a big believer in that to an extent, but I was actually speaking about you specifically on a podcast with Dr. Jim Taylor, who's a sports psychologist. And I was speaking about how it doesn't matter whether I've been in the gym for 12 months working as hard as I can, and you've had 12 months off doing as little as you can. You come into the gym and you out bench press me every day of the week with ease. And he goes, yeah, because one thing that hard work doesn't give you is height, or one thing that hard work So he goes, hard work won't make you 7 foot. He was speaking specifically about NBA players. And I thought that's a good point. And I think a specific talent of yours is to be able to have that difficult conversation with yourself and go, all right, Jock, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm targeting. Here's the gap. It seems too big. What was it with those two areas? And I assume there's different elements that stood out to you with football and running. But I just think this is interesting because I reckon there'd be a lot of people around our age who have had these same conversations or might have just let things play out longer than they needed to. What was it with those two sports where you had the realization, okay, I'm not going to be able to actually perform at the level that I want to get to? Because I know that's a difficult conversation, especially with the approach that you have to sports.
Yeah, well, the two sports is probably different actually. The football one, like I said, come to a head sort of mid-season, and like I said, the club was in a bit of turmoil, but so was my career really in terms of trying to make it as elite level. So that sort of come quickly. I could just tell there's just differences even within the club. The best players of the club were just just better than me, and I wasn't going to get near them. I could just feel it. But yeah, and you can just general play. You can just see it. I don't know. People sometimes can't have that self-awareness, but I had it at that time. But athletics was different. It was a slow death, really. I probably at 16, I think it was a track where you and me were doing a time trial, 600 meters out at Essendon track there, and I ran shit, and I'd done that time probably 2 years earlier. Like I think we were doing a 600, and I ran that time 2 years earlier. I hadn't improved, and I walked off the track. I've never done that in my life in terms of just quit a session, and the probably writing was on the wall then. But so I was 16 then. I kept thinking the dream, probably right up to the first year of uni at 19. When I just turned 19, I probably still thought. So I didn't want to give up. So I kept going, coming back and training hard and kept coming back. I'm going, the times are going to drop for me. I'm going to get back. But so that was probably a 2.5 year death in terms of trying to give up on that athletic dream. I was just relentless on it. And but looking back, yeah, 16, I was definitely, the writing was on the wall at that point. And didn't make national teams after that. 615 I made, and then didn't make it after that. So sorry, state teams I should say, for the national, not national team. And yeah, so that was a bit interesting. So maybe I didn't have the self-awareness, but I think it was more just my never sort of give up attitude at the time, which is great to have. But probably did maybe a missed opportunity. I could have flicked back into football a bit earlier, maybe got a little more in my football career earlier as a 17, 18-year-old. But through that time, I was just so focused on studying. I really wanted to get a good result in my VCE. And, I'm not hugely naturally academically minded. Like I had my friendship group, they all sort of finished with 98 plus on their VCE score. They're all elite. And I just wanted to finish the nines. That was my big thing. And it was actually super disappointed not to get into the nines. I got just under 90 of my inter, but well and truly enough to get into sport management. I think was around 81 or something at the stage. But
if it makes you feel any better, you nearly doubled mine.
It doesn't mean. Yeah, it was a big thing to me at the time. But that probably year 12, I was probably focusing on that definitely as an 18-year-old, more so than any sporting pursuit that year. But yeah, so to answer your question, I don't know, maybe I got better at the second time around. And then if you follow on to another sporting journey I had probably more recent years. So it's 2018. So this is not long ago, actually. This is, I struggled with calf injuries by this stage. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting a bit older or something. But I hopped on an indoor rower, right? Indoor rower. And I thought, this actually feels good. Like, I feel like I'm going all right on indoor rower. And a couple weeks later, a few weeks later, I did it, found out what a 2K time trial is. That's pretty much the measuring stick of a rower. A rower is power and endurance and fitness. And I pumped out a 650. And I looked it up, and it's like a Concept 2 online. It has all the rankings of all us weekend warriors. And I think it was maybe top 20 nationally or something, or top 15 or something like that. And but then I looked at the Olympic rowers, and the Olympic squad guys were doing about 6 flat. And me being me again, I've just clicked, my brain just switching again. I've gone, holy shit. I've been sitting in the wrong sport for all these years. I'm 30 years old, mind you, this is ridiculous. But I'm 30 years old, and I'm like, I'm in the wrong sport. Like, rowing was like, I'm big. I've got the endurance. This is my sport. Like, what have I been doing all these years? So I thought, who knows? I could maybe make a late Olympics. I'm thinking 6 years time is Paris Olympics 2024, which is coming up. And I thought this is going to sound ridiculous to listeners, but I don't care. And so I went all out again. So I'm all in training on the indoor rower, right? This is off this 650 I've done. I thought I've got to find 50 seconds. I'll get invitation to the Australian squad. And once you're in there, who knows? But that's pretty much how it works. If you could roll, if you're listening and you can do a 6 flat on a 2K indoor rower, you'll pretty much get a crack at the national squad. They'll put you in and you might get an 8 where the technique isn't quite as important. And you're just all power and guts and put you in the middle of the boat and away you go. So I was all in. So I ended up going to the nationals later that year. But after 6 months of training, I only improved like 10 seconds down to 640. And I remember one day I got beaten by this guy at this local indoor race. And I could just tell he was very good. He was one of the best in the world, I think, at the long form of indoor rowing. And I could again tell there was I just didn't have that power in my legs that he had. I could just tell, and I was only the early days, but I thought, oh yeah, I could just see the difference here from what I wanted to, me being me trying to get to the Olympic level. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to close that. I was down to 640 and close that last 40 seconds. I don't think I was going to get it. And what I finished in national, I think I finished 8th in my age group and 26th overall in the nationals there, held in Melbourne in the indoor rowing. And then I went on the outdoor rower and went to state titles on the outdoor on the water. And went to state, didn't do too much, but went and competed. And outdoor rowing that's where the technique comes into it for those rowers who haven't rowed. It's all about technique really, and I didn't have that much because I was just starting on the sport. And then I probably kept at it for another 12. So it was about 18 months overall, kept at it. And then just didn't improve much for that 640. So I got down and just couldn't quite crack it from there. So then I knew the dream was over. But to be honest, at the same time, that's actually when we got pregnant with my wife, my now wife, and Tom. And little Tom was born later that year. So I knew my rowing the hours needed to do it was probably over. But at the same time, I knew I wasn't going to make it elite level. So, but it was just funny. And I do enjoy it still. I do look back and think, oh, that's good though. At least I turned that stone as well. I'm not going to be 45 and go, oh shit, I could have been an Olympic rower. So these, I'm sure this is the thing, God, this guy's done some sports, but it's just, I think I feel good about it in fact, the way I've done that, because I feel comfortable knowing that I've gone all out, and maybe I just didn't have quite have that talent to get to the elite level. Sort of got to that, semi okay level, and that's what we did. So, but it's fun. Indoor rowing is bloody hard. So if you're listening, have a crack at a 2K indoor, and shoot me your time if you do one. It's extremely hard sport.
You roped me into one. I remember that, and I can confirm they're very difficult. I had a couple of cracks and thought, well, pretty much what your body type is, mine's the opposite. So I definitely wasn't. I was made for distance running, I think, but. Jock, one thing that I'm interested in, I don't want to jump around too much, and if I'm missing anything, hey, feel free to pull me up. But I think when you spend a little bit of time, breaking down your background in sport, you touched on what it was that you studied at uni, and you haven't even spoken yet about getting started with elite team leadership and your stepping stone, I guess, into the corporate world or into the big world of sport management or team management in your particular instance. But you look at what it is that you did for the last 15 years. And I think on paper, you go, okay, well, with his love for sport management or team management in particular, with his passion for sport, he's obviously got a great understanding of what it takes to be an elite level athlete, got a great understanding of what it takes to help a team function well, or at least at the very least, he's very interested in the process of what that takes. You go, what would be a good move for this guy is to consider getting into the world of coaching. And so I think even at the time where you and I started having pretty good conversations, probably a year or two before you ever made an official move, getting into the world of footy coaching, the wheels were spinning. And there was a level of confidence in me that this is where Jock belongs. Like, this is a scene that I can imagine him really flourishing in. And I'll skip a bit for the sake of this story, and you feel free to fill in the gaps. But you look at where you are. We're recording this June 2023, based on when you got started. I can't remember the exact dates, but the speed at which you've kind of climbed through the ranks of the world of coaching, you're a lot more humble about what you've done than what I am about you and what you've done. It suggests I'm probably right, that there's some unique combination of two of your big strengths, which has worked together to find you in a scene which is really suited to your character. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or if you can fill in the gaps in between that, but I'll just be interested to hear your thoughts on what I've just said, because from my perspective, it's incredibly quick, but not a surprise.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we're down at the Falcons now, which has been incredible for my development, and line coach in the 16s and development coach in the 18s, and we've got a really strong team this year and a great coaching group. But this is not, even though I've coached the last few years, I've been on this journey probably for 15 years, as you sort of discussed. Went in, university and started sport management, majored in management and leadership and how to manage teams. And that was where I was always headed. And I didn't know quite exactly what it looked like and where I was going to end up. But being in a leadership position, managing people was what I was all about. And so from there, I went in and did a bunch of like personal development coaching courses there, which I loved. I was like 10 plus years ago now, and got into high performing team space and leadership coaching. And, I'm 25 and I'm speaking to Mercedes-Benz executives in meetings about leadership and personal development and high performance. I'm presenting in groups, at Holmes Glen, TAFE, the two, full rooms of, young university students. And I'm only 25, 26 at that stage to present to them and schools and sporting clubs and individuals and elite athletes. This is the space I was doing with my business, Elite Team Leadership. And like I said, and then I had the podcast, the JockX podcast as well. So I was really just learning off these incredible minds, these people who have had great success themselves. And that's the journey I started. This is 10 plus years of this is a fanatic. And I'd probably call myself a fanatic in terms of the books and podcasts I'm following, and constantly, like, you don't get in my car without listening to a podcast. It's not listening to trash on the radio. My bedside table's full of high performance books, leadership books, autobiographies of highly successful individuals. That's all I read. I don't read fiction. I just watch sports documentaries like you wouldn't believe. I watch them multiple times too, not just once. I've got like I just finished The Last Dance again and again. I've watched that. I watched my 30 from 30 docos on repeat. I kind of find them quite soothing, actually. I watch them and I always pick up little bits and pieces. So I'm always on the search, and this has been a long time. This has been my whole life. And got into, so I'm doing leadership. Did some courses with leading teams. Obviously they're huge in the AFL space as well. And so that's what I've always been about. And I sort of thought, in the leadership position, helping people get the best out of themselves. And maybe me, who wasn't super talented, as I've just talked about, I got a lot out of myself, I think. And I thought I could probably have compassion for people who maybe aren't as super talented, but trying to get the most out of themselves, and understanding and how it doesn't always come easy for most people. And how you sort of get the most out of yourself with what you have, and that's what it's all about. And so that led me finally got into coaching. I think it was 2020 was the first year I got into sort of local youth coaching, and then being a part of straight into the Falcons program sort of a year or so later, into the last couple of years into Falcons and coaching that, and I want to keep developing. That's pretty much my plan, is to keep going. And there's no finish line, there's no end point. It's just and I'm super happy if I end up back wherever, like in coaching, whether it's back in community level or state level or but there'll be no doubt, as I'm sure you're probably listening to this podcast, we'll go all in on trying to go as far as we can, and just help as many. There's nothing better than just seeing a performance, a team coming together, just going all out, and just on the siren starts the game, and you're fully prepared, you've done all you can, you go all out during the game, and leave it there, and then you can just know at the end of the game when you sit in the change rooms that you've done everything right. You've done it all in terms of preparation and giving yourself every best chance of performing. And when you get those good little wins and you kick your first game, we have multiple goals, at a high level, or you get those breakthroughs, or you hit 30 possessions, or you keep your opposition goalless, or whatever it is. You know, they're the little moments of joy along the process of getting the best out of yourself, and that's what I want to be a part of. And I think that's what am doing, and that's what this whole footy coach is about getting the best out of coaches and best out of players, and then obviously I'm doing my own personal coaching. I'm a part of that, so it's been fun, and I think this is been a long journey. Like it's like the old and we're by no stretch gotten to where I want to get to. I'll point that out, but we're on a really enjoyable journey, and it's tough though. It's a challenging, like anything. It's really challenging. We have, as many of us do, young families. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and you have other job commitments as well to help do to keep things going, and you do all this around that, and luckily I have a supportive wife and stuff who lets me get away on weekends with the guys and coach some footy and pursue this, because I think she sees as well that this is where you've got to be. I think this is where I'm at probably my best, I guess, in this space, and so that's another long answer for you, but that's how it is.
It's good to hear some of the details around the scaffold that I have in my mind. I'm sure it's the same for so many of the fans of the podcast. So you might have just alluded to this based on where you said you're not necessarily even close to where you imagine or dream of being in the next few years. Have you? I don't think I've ever actually asked you, like, in terms of where you would like to end up. Have you got your eyes set on a lead role at an AFL coaching club, or? Because I mean, you look at the guests that you've interviewed and the conversations around coaching that you've had, and for me, I take away, okay, he's at least open to the idea of having conversations with people in these roles. You also just said that you'd be happy if you ended up back at a community level club. Where do you actually see your coaching going, or in a dream scenario, where would you imagine it going?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I love the term dream scenario, but I think getting to the AFL level is probably the goal. Coaching football at AFL level, and I think, and I don't know, some of the boys maybe, as you do in the club rooms, give you a bit of stick over it, but I think it's very doable. I think I've got a pretty unique background, as we've just discussed. And I don't say it's going to happen, and it might not happen anytime soon, but I think that's probably where I like to end up, at that sort of level. And that's what we're doing once you're on the elite pathways. That's what we're all trying to do, is get to the elite level, whether as a player or as a coach or administration or so forth. That's what I think we all should aspire to do, is getting the absolute best of ourselves, and I'm no different. But no, coaching community level, I'm just, the thought of getting back into that would really excite me too. Nothing better than being a part of a team, a community, a town. There's definitely some local clubs I look at, how awesome would it be to coach that club. So no, there's great opportunities, but I see myself as a career coach. So I'd like to think that I'll coach for years and maybe decades. That's what I'm sort of setting myself up for. That's what I want to do, and I just love the process of just constantly just getting a little bit better, just a little bit better, just a little bit better. Like I'm twice the fucking coach that I was 2 years ago, and I'll be the same in another couple of years, So just keeping that projection heading in the right way. And I think it's just so much. So much. It excites me so much areas you can work on. Obviously the game and structures and tactics, and then the fundamentals, and then I just got little buddies just walked in here. Hey, buddy. Oh, we're going, are we? I'll edit this bit out. Hang on.
100%.
Oh,
story of my
Cassie,
life.
I'm in a podcast. What minute's this up to?
That actually was a beautiful time for it to cut off.
Can you help out, buddy? What? How much time out to? What's about? Oh, Jesus, an hour.
Have we been gone for an hour?
Wow.
I'm
I
actually
know.
glad. I'm glad they cut. I'm glad little man came in when he did then, because that was the end of like a really good answer.
Was it the end? I didn't even know where I finished at
Nah,
the
yeah,
end.
it was. It
Oh,
was
cool.
because
All right.
I heard my little mate just pipe up. I was like, not now, motherfucker.
Yes. Okay, so what do we finish
Nah,
up?
that's
We might as well try and finish this up. I think an hour, otherwise no one's going to listen to this. Otherwise,
yeah, sweet. All right.
I've done awesome though, bro. I think we've covered
Oh,
nearly everything I want to cover. Yeah, we really have covered everything. Yeah, sorry, 1 second. Um, so I think we've covered everything else. Is there anything else you want to ask me? Is anything?
not particularly. I mean, I could keep talking about this for ages, but it's
Is it
actually
any good?
really.
I'm talking
Oh, bro,
shit.
nah, it's very good. Actually, I was thinking before. I like how. Yeah, I can tell you all about this later. But yeah, you're good, I reckon, at being humble and just like being. I like how before you were talking about Pendles, and you said, "Hey, look, we're not best mates." Blah blah blah. But bro, I feel like you've gotten so much better in this scene as well. Like just some of your answers, I'm like, this is unreal. Like this is, you
Cool.
can tell he's done 100 episodes. Bro, I
I
reckon.
reckon.
Do you want me to round it up?
I reckon. Let's wrap it up. I
Yeah,
reckon if
I'll
you.
continue on from what you just finished saying. So you were just pretty much saying like where your goals are. You'd be happy back at the community level clubs.
That's right.
Blah, blah. Yeah, that was kind of where I imagined an answer like that going. It's really exciting. I mean, the world's your oyster at the moment from where I stand, based on the fact that I mean, quick results often speak to a person's character, and I mean how quickly you've climbed through the field, despite how far it is. You're still aspiring to go. I think speak volumes about not only your work ethic but a skill set that you have. So, I mean, as your best mate, I'm really excited to watch this just continue to flourish for you. And I'm sure so many of the people who are a part of, whether it's your memberships or the clubs or playing under you, are really excited and supportive of it as well. So mate, it's so good just to get a chance to be able to actually sit down and have an excuse to ask you these questions for an hour and hear about where you're going and why you've chosen it and all that. So hey, as a fan of your work and as a fan of you as a bloke, I'm pumped to see what the next couple of years hold for you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. No, it's been fun. I guess after 3 years, we're allowed to talk about myself for one episode, and which is always an interesting one. But no, it's been I really have enjoyed this having a conversation, even though I've done obviously the majority of the talking. And yeah, thanks, mate, for coming over and having a chat with us. And I know with the fact that I always say to guests that we'll talk soon, but I know for a fact we'll probably talk later today. So
speak to you on the way to sale.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
All right, brother. No, thanks for letting me do this for you and your listeners. It's been a heap of fun.
Cheers, man. Thanks.